Thank you.
Hey,
So,
go ahead. I was just saying, okay.
okay, so what I want to do tonight is just basically, I appreciate y'all getting together a little bit early before the council meeting and talk about the ballot initiative that I brought up during our budget workshop. And so I kind of wanted to, one of the questions that was brought up was timing and making sure we had enough time and getting everything together. So what we put in front of you tonight is basically all the documentation that goes back and behind how we arrived at why we're asking for a 1-cent ballot initiative. And so it's not for us to read and go through tonight. I will promise you I will go through this relatively quickly so there's time for question and answer when we're done. But I want to thank everyone that put all the work into getting it ready for tonight. I know everyone was cramming to really get this stuff in front of you, but a lot of the stuff that's there, I would ask you to take a look at it between now and the second reading and consider what's in the pages. And if you have questions in between there, please let me know. Let myself, Jared, any one of us know what that might be. But tonight what I want to go through is pretty much some of it's a recap from what you've already seen, but I kind of want to break it down a little bit more and to kind of show you how this would work collectively. So basically, I want to give you the historical information, the current financial state, the current challenges, and talk about the proposed sales tax initiative, the ballot language, revenue projections, ballot objectives and expenditures, allocation, timelines, messaging, and communication. So kind of like how we're going to go about it, how we're going to express the message, what we have to do. If I go back 2 slides, you will see from the very beginning at the bottom, everything that we do and everything we publish has to say paid for by City of Republic, David Cameron, City Administrator, and our address on it. So every publication you see and everything that we print that's in front of you has to have that language on it, otherwise it can be construed as an ethics violation. So back in 1981, the citizens of the Republic actually passed a 1-cent sales tax on themselves, and the vote was 558 to 376. So basically, they established this vote. It had a 20-year sunset, and in 2001, they re-voted on this and basically took away the sunset of that. In 1986, this is when the trade-off, as I mentioned during the work session, took place, was they were looking for a half-cent sales tax to deal with streets in the community. So at that time is when the trade-off took place for personal property tax. So in Republic, the citizens do not pay for their vehicles or personal property tax. Now you will get a personal property tax statement, but it obviously goes to the school and other locations. So that's where the trade-off took place. You can see the population was about 4,400, and in '86 it was 5,500. Our annual operating budget, this is a recap in 2017, kind of the why. In 2017 we had $2,000 after revenue. The following year we had $45,000. What a lot of that was driven by, if you recall, we did a refinance of our debt. So we refinanced the debt and freed up cash. We paid off some of the debt, but we refinanced, saved $1 million in interest. But what we also did in that was did some refinancing that freed up some of the cash position that would give us a little bit more flexibility than $2,000. So trying to create that cushion of, if there is such a thing, I won't call it a cushion. I want to say that we created a little bit more between $2,000 and that's a fine line on $22 million to only have $2,000. $47,000, I would tell you, is still a very difficult line. And in 2019, we're projecting a $17,000 revenue after expenses. What's interesting of the current 1-cent allocation is that 80% of that cent that was established in 1981, currently 80% of that money is utilized for public safety right now. So basically, police and fire occupy 80% of that 1 cent. So where does the rest of our money come from? Property tax for funding the rest of our general fund operation. And if you recall, general fund does not include street. People have asked, does that include public works? No, it does not. It's basically court, city administration, finance, HR, admin, things of that nature, which goes in there, and police and fire. So the current challenge is public safety personnel, deficit in staffing. So right now, we have a regional pay disparity. I would tell you that our officers last year, if you recall, on police and fire, this council took a bold step. We made some adjustments in our budget, freed up $160,000 of additional cash. We consolidated some positions, cut costs to create that money, and made one big jump of about 7% for our police officers. That got us to one rung below the below. And so what we need now is basically, we're 5 officers short in the police department, but we're about $2,500 a year right now below just a starting pay of what you can do and what you can start at any other location. when you consider in there that we require the employee to contribute, which we're about to fix in this budget, in their retirement, it makes it very difficult for someone to even remotely want to leave that position and come to work. So a lot of what we're trying to do is address the regional pay disparity with the existing staff, but also to add additional staff to that. How that also affects the overall city, though, is because that same pool of cash that I talked about on the admin side still pays for other positions. So if you recall the auditor, when they were here last year, they were saying we were short on the financial staff. So if you've only got $17,000, you can see adding additional financial staff could be a challenge. The existing municipal facilities, city hall, community development, public works, which you'll see in a slide, we actually hired an engineer to come in the last week just trying to create what is the actual need of the city hall building, the liability of the exposure that we have. What we found in that project was just to bring this building, all three buildings up to code, was about $780,000. That's not adding capacity, that's not addressing any of the needs that we have for just utilization. $780,000 just to bring it up to code. And so, and that's all three buildings combined. Funding for the street department, I brought up the existing debt, or I brought up the funding for the street department where we moved it out of the motor fuel sales tax, out of street, moved it into public safety or into the police department. That's $400,000 a year. So basically right now for roughly 425 lane miles in the city, we have just less than $200,000 to address those needs. General repair and infrastructure improvements, economic development opportunities like Garden Business Park, or OTC, behind the OTC property, behind Republic Commons, behind Arby's. When you look at that dead-end street, that's a street that's an economic development opportunity that needs a cash funding to finish that street that would open up more lots for opportunity. I can tell you what's holding those properties back and why they're not selling. It's a dead-end street. They're going, who's going to pay for it? So I do believe that's something that the city can do. The employee retirement benefit, there's the regional disparity where we are the lowest paid retirement in the region, which I mentioned. Recruitment and intention. Two other projects that we've added to the project was funding for public services, so the recycling center. This would add that back into it. What I want to be very cautious of is if there was ever a chance where you had to cut expenses again, these are going to be the low-hanging fruit that you got to say, listen, before we have citywide recycling, we're going to have police officers. So what we made a choice was, people were saying, hey, listen, why did we close the recycling center? They wanted $50,000 a year. Our belief is we needed to have a funding mechanism to take care of it, and also adding another citywide cleanup to it. The general fund existing debt is Fire Station 1 and 2, and then the police department infill. So we're going to have to do some stuff to address debt in our system. Also, the existing debt in the street department is something that we would be addressing with this tax. In fact, when you see the sheet, I've got some information for you I want to pass out for you to take. In the first year, one of the recommendations is, if it was to pass, was to pay off the existing street debt of $457,000 immediately. And just get completely out of the Miller Road debt and out of the debt that was for the street that went to Walmart. So, so the proposed solution is a 1% sales tax, April of 2019 ballot, to provide funding for the current challenges, would generate approximately $2.7 million annually as of 2018. What I want to stop and tell you with this, and I'll probably skip ahead to a slide that's there. One thing I do not want to give the impression is that a 1 cent sales tax fixes the financial position of the city. As you'll see, there comes a barrier when all of a sudden, because the employees that we need to hire right now, that's probably stuff that should have been added 5 years ago. And so we're talking about, we're just getting caught up to the present. By 2025, you'll see that the growth rate that we're seeing, we're probably going to have to add 9 more in each department. But I'll go through that here. But I don't want to give the impression like, hey, we do this and this fixes all of it. So, if you have any questions, I'll take them at the end of the. This is just the proposed ballot language, which is in your packet tonight. Just ask, shall the city impose a city sales tax of 1% to provide for additional public safety resources? We talked about public infrastructure, including City Hall. So it was important for us to add the word City Hall into the project. So there was no, hey, what is a public infrastructure? It talks about dealing with City Hall as well. We're probably going to strike the additional citywide cleanup and just call additional city services, because what happens if in the future we don't want to do the citywide cleanup because we don't want to do a spring and a fall, we want to cut back to one. We don't want it in a ballot language that says you're required to do that. So we do got some tweaking that we want to do tonight or for the second read. This is the revenue projections for 2019. Basically, if it was to pass, you would generate about $1.3 million in the first year, and you can kind of see what it would do in the first 10 years. And why we did it in a 10-year projection was just to see what it would generate versus where the City Hall project would be, because in the City Hall project, if we was to issue debt and do that over a 20-year period, it would be no different than doing like we did with Fire Station 1 and 2. So basically, you're pledging yourself out. So if you need to add additional staff during those times, debt could be in the way of stopping you from getting that done. And so the idea is to pay the City Hall off in the first 5 years with cash as it's being built. Public safety and personnel. So 44% of the 1 cent would be for public safety, $13.3 million in the first 10 years. And I would tell you this, when it talks about it's to reduce liability and improve community safety. It's putting more officers on the street. It's reducing the liability that is to the officer. It's improving the safety of that officer and to our community as well. But it also addresses the deficit in our staffing. It's 10 new staff members in the fire department. And all of this would be by 2024. So basically there is not a provision that says, hey, it passes, we go out and hire 18 people or 19 people. It would be 10 new staff members in the police or in the fire department. So it would be 4 in 2020. It'd be 3 in 2021, 3 in 2022, and then 3 in 2023. So I think that's right. By 2024, all of them, is that right? 2020, yeah, 4, 3, 3, 3, yes. So it's 2021, 22, and 23. So by 2024, though, you would have all your staffing in place for both fire and police. But police would go 3, 3, and 3 on, I apologize. I gotta back up. There's a year in there that we don't hire any because it frees up enough cash. Again, the objective is to stay in tune with, by 2024, all of them will be hired. And all that is in a packet of information I've got there. But what it is there has to be a place where there's about $1.5 million that has to be freed up to deal with the City Hall project. Whereas, again, staying in a cash position versus as borrowing the money. And so there's 1 year after it's 2021 that we don't hire any, and then 2022 we resume with finishing out the rest of the staff. It also adds for 1 animal control officer. Right now we have 1 individual that handles the entire community for dealing with animal control. We're talking about finishing the new building, and so, or actually buying the building and having that, we're going to need another animal control officer.
And again, Nixon Ozark have property tax where we...
That's correct, yes. So basically, the average is about 72 cents, right about 72 cents for other cities they actually have on their books, which is about 2.7 million for personal, or not personal property tax, but they have a fire district that pays for it. And so just to be clear, I'm not advocating going to a fire district. It's just what other cities have that we don't. One is we have our own fire department where they have fire districts that work for a completely different board. And they have a funding mechanism that keeps them off the city's, they're not on the city's balance sheet. So that's us and Springfield are the only two, but Springfield has the level property tax. And so they have funding mechanisms that actually fund those departments and infrastructure as well.
And then they also have certain areas that have, what are they,
CIDs, yeah. And so as you go through what's outlined in this book, it'll show you what other cities have and their CIDs and their tax rates, and kind of show you how we're different.
So it doesn't look like sales tax, but it is. And if you buy here at a certain spot, it could be.
Yeah, if you see the difference between, it's actually going to be probably more cheaper cost effective for our residents, because people that are traveling through our community are paying for it, versus if you had a fire tax or a levy. Basically, it's only the people that live in town that are paying for the fire service, and we know that not everyone that's calling 911 is actually lives in town. So, but I wanted to also show you in this graph that I had to cut it down to size, but we created a graph that shows what the growth rate, the projected population growth of 18,043 to 2040 says 37,386. So basically taking the methodology that's outlined in the book, and I believe that was provided to you from both the police and fire chief, of how they had the methodology of how many staff members they're required to have per 1,000 people. I believe if you we tracked that growth rate with what that methodology is, and that pretty much equates to by 2024 or 2025, 2024, I'll just use that number, we'll be at 32 at 2018, roughly. We'll need 9 more by 2024 if the growth rate stays the same. So basically, what we're initially doing is taking care of what is needed today, but by the time we get done with taking care of today, we're going to need to add 9 more people. This is basically what that graph was telling us. So, now granted, it is data, and data can change, growth rates can change, but if we stay on the same track that we are right now, that's a very foreseeable, otherwise we'll be right back in the same position we're at today. So, why I bring that up is because the model that was created with the cent has to continuously grow with the community, and as you're adding more to that. So the expenses are not getting less, they're actually they're growing, and you're going to add more to it. And the 9 that you added, or the 10 that were added, they're still getting a COLA, they're still getting a step on an annual basis. So all of that was figured because we were trying to establish whether we could sunset this or not. Public safety, did I go back one? Public safety is 44.96. Public safety, okay, that's just a continuation. So what it would initially do is it would add $1,500 to a firefighter, a current position right now, in addition to their COLA and their step, would get a $1,500 increase in 2019, if it was to pass. It creates a $4,000 separation for rank. So right now there is a compression issue between captains and positions. That if you're going to go from an engineer to a captain, it may only be $2,500, but the responsibility is significantly different. So creating that separation. In the police department, this roughly rides around $2,500 to $3,000 a year. This would, and both of these would put us right at the Greene County level of what they're paying their officers to work at Greene County. So basically, we would no longer be at the bottom of that. We'd be at the very top, or at least competing with Greene County for those positions. So Nixa, Ozark, Willard, Stratford, whatever that would be, Republic would be at the top of that list and competing for those same jobs. And what that also includes is every year that would continue to grow, and that number would continue to go up by 3% based upon COLA and merit step. For the existing buildings, 21% of it is for City Hall, $6.38 million. So basically, I sat down and met with a contractor to figure out what 20,000 square feet would do for the City of Republic, what that would require, and basically set up a strategy for how that would have to be done. And kind of came up with a price, a design build versus doing all the bidding would definitely have a lot of savings for us. A construction manager at risk is what they call it. Missouri now allows that, so that would be the way to go about it. That would probably have the most benefit to the community and most cost-effective way to get it done. It takes care of 3 existing buildings. This building, I believe, was built in 1888, and the one across the street and the one beside it was built in 1901. So basically, the cost to upgrade was $780,000. What that does not take into account is the street that's out here. It's, if you see, it's got, I think, 6 to 8 inches of asphalt that's allowing the water to run underneath the building. That's going to cost us about $750,000 to address just that street. We're still going to have to address that street no matter what at some time, regardless, just for the integrity of the street and the landscape, which we told them in the capital improvement sales tax. Main Street is part of that cost. Reduced maintenance upkeep. Construction would be at construct a new facility at the North Oakwood Avenue. I know there was a lot of debate on whether to build it there, but I do know that there was a study done for about $40,000 that identified where the location of that building would be, and I believe that it went through all the committees, the Capital Improvement Committee of the city, and also through the City Council. Began construction in 2021 and then pay it off in 5 years. If you can't tell, I'm going to be very adamant about the idea that we do not want to be in debt on a building. Funding for the street department, 12% of the first 10 years, $3.6 million roughly. Return 100% of motor fuel sales tax to the street fund, which is about $400,000 annually. The other piece to remember this is if we pay off the debt early, it's about another $136,000. So you'd be roughly looking at $500,000 that you should be putting into the street program every year. That's a game changer for us, because if you got an economic development opportunity, just like we were sitting down yesterday with a business that was offering 30 to 50 new jobs. And they were talking about a particular area in town and a particular street that was not up to grade, and they're like, hey, what can the city do? And it's kind of like we're doing with the OTC project. We're kind of discussing what if our crews install it and you buy the materials. We're trying to create deals to help make that work, but it would sure be helpful if we had material money to get some of that stuff done. And if you drive down any of the side roads behind this building right here, you will see that there is a lot of maintenance. Just even the new streets are important, but the existing infrastructure is equally important. So I love this idea. You guys are so lucky I don't have my little laser pointer tonight. But the micro paving and sealing, I'm looking forward to seeing that program. If we can get this done, is to seeing the micro sealing and paving program done. But provide funding for economic development opportunities. I mentioned the OTC and Republic Commons. I cannot tell you how much it'd be nice to have that in play right now, that we could put that money where it would make money and help build on our sales tax base, things of that nature. I mean, think about it. If you're in business, it takes money. And I don't want to say government's not a business, but in a lot of ways, if you're trying to draw up and generate and expand your sales tax base, you need to put money in place and partner with these developments, which is what we're doing. We did this with Flat Creek, if you recall. We paid half the money of the water line. But if we imagine we didn't have the money to say, hey, listen, Flat Creek, we want to partner with you on that. It's very difficult to say, hey, we'd love to have you, but there's nothing to really help get your development in play. So, and then the employee retirement benefit, this is 14.58% in the first 10 years. It addresses the regional disparity, assists in recruitment and retention. This is basically a deferred compensation plan. This is not building on the existing plan that we currently have. This does not get rid of that plan. It just supplements that plan. And then funding for public services is 3%, reestablish recycling program, construct a facility, annual operating expenses, and then continue the spring and add a fall cleanup. And then the general fund existing debt, 3.84%, pays off fire station 1 and 2 for roughly $1.9 million. That will free up about $200,000, Debbie? Ballpark. So basically this is the breakdown of the same thing I just went through. So the work session is tonight. The first reading of the ordinance is tonight. The second reading of the ordinance is December 11th. And the election date, if it was this council's desire to approve approve the ballot, would take place on April 2nd. If approved, it's a minimum of 90 days before collection of sales tax receipts begin. Messaging and communication has to say paid for by David Cameron, City Administrator, City of Republic, and it has to have our address, 213 North Main Street, Republic, Missouri. I saw the ethics complaint against another neighboring city that outlined what had to be in all those documents. So if you look at it and say, my gosh, why is this on every page? Because I don't want to see myself attached to one of those complaints because they name me personally. So that's why we're going to see all that. We can only educate. We can't even advocate for or against. We can't say this is a ridiculous idea. We can just say this is what the issues are. I can't even say, well, if this doesn't pass, we're in a bad spot. We can't do that. What we got to say is this is what is needed. This is what we believe is there, and this is the best solution that we have at this time. The idea is to host 3 town hall meetings. I'll probably ask if it's in your area, if you want to attend and you want to participate with your constituents that are in your ward, you're more than welcome to do that. The Chamber of Commerce luncheons, the Republic School District staff meetings. We're going to do a one Facebook Live town hall for Q&A, basically taking questions from people and say, listen, is there any questions that you have to clarify that? Because not everybody's going to come out. One thing I learned doing these several years ago, hosting those town hall meetings, you might have 20 or 30 people in total. So how do we get to a larger population and try to engage more folks into that? Create an information link on the city website. We'll also create an informational booklet. So basically you have that. We got to condense it down from what you have because you've got the full report on City Hall included into that document. It shows you every single thing that they found in the inspection. Presence at the Republic, at the RAC Spring Business Expo. So basically, we actually have, I don't remember what the size of this thing is now, but we have a exhibit board that will have the pictures of all the infrastructure, all the things that we're looking to do with the 1 cent. So basically, we'll be there to take questions and answers from the community as they come by. The revenue trends, this is the piece that I want to show you that was very telling. So what I did is I took 30 years or 20 years worth of expenses. I went all the way out to 2038 and said, okay, what would the budget look like in 2038 if everything can stay at a growth rate and growth trend? So there's a lot going on in this graph. But what this is the top line that's going there is a 6% growth rate. The bottom blue line is a 3% growth rate. The red line in the middle, right here, is the expenses. So you can see a dip where the expenses drop down. This is that year where I'm talking about not hiring the positions, or there's a dip that we're not paying or adding more positions to it. But if you look right here, if we just grow at a steady 3%, at 2030, the sales tax is now 100% in public safety. So public safety is a huge piece of this puzzle, which is why back here taking care of City Hall is critical. Because right here, if that only grows at a 3%, it'll speak out, and 1% will no longer cover that. So we're still talking in 10 years, we're still talking about doing something that deals with public safety, most likely in a property tax of some sort. There's going to have to be something that supplements public safety long term. Because look at this, in 2035 you got to add 18 more. It just starts moving up. Now, if it grows at 6%, which is what this line represents, this is 5%. I will tell you that we have averaged over the last 4 years at 6.3%. When you're budgeting sales tax,
Yeah, it's erratic.
It's extremely erratic. Property tax increases have gone at 12%. Franchise fees remain flat. Some of that has to do with just internet sales. People are no longer buying cable TV, so we're not getting the franchise fees off that. And then this is the last piece I want to show you. Black Friday pulled in record online sales of $6.2 billion. If I see one threat to that, it's that we have no mechanism to collect on online sales. And here's the deal: given the way the state legislature is set up, even with that massive ruling that came out of South Dakota, I still believe the city would have to pass a use tax onto their community to get that done. So all of this could be extremely, this could actually trend, stay at the 3%, or actually dip. Because to see $6.2 billion in sales, and to realize we didn't collect a penny of that if that was done in our own community, that's a challenge. That's not saying that Walmart, because I believe if you buy something local, Walmart is collecting on that here locally. But I know a lot more people that are buying more stuff online, and we're not capturing that, and that could be a real threat to what we're doing with this initiative. So anyway, I went through that extremely fast. Went through it in 25 minutes, which was the objective. And I would take any questions. Would you hit that light switch for me, Garrett? Or yeah, either one. Way to go, Andrew. But what you have in front of you is a booklet that you can look at, take a peek at. I've also got some things I'm going to pass out that you can look and take with you that shows you. It basically breaks down the operating expenses year by year by year. So basically we took every year from 2018 to 2038 and said, and adding that 3% escalator, adding those positions, and showing this is what the actual budget, if everything stays at a 3% trend, even in expenses, you got uniform expense, you got guns, you got cars, you've got things that have to be added. All of that was added into the budget in and of itself to demonstrate that the sales tax is not something that can actually come back. It's actually something that's going to have to stay out there without a sunset on it. And so that's what is presented in this ballot is a 1% without a sunset provision included in there. So, but pretty much it's 9 police officers, 10 firefighters, adjusting their pay, building a city hall, addressing the retirement, and addressing the streets. That's what we're looking at doing. So, if there are any questions that I can answer.
Have we had any input from the business community on any possible effect on spending because of the higher tax rate?
I don't want to speak for who I spoke to. I would say that I spoke with the chamber, but I can't speak for where they position themselves on that. But yeah, I have spoke with them. And it was not I want to give them adequate time to review that information, but I do plan to speak to the chamber group to explain what we're looking at. And there's usually about, 75 to 100 people that show up to that event on once a month, the chamber meeting?
70-ish, 70, 75.
Yeah, probably close to that.
And it represents quite a bit of the business community.
I don't have a question, but more of a statement. I know that slideshow wasn't just, hey, we did it in 30 minutes or an hour. I know there's a lot of time involved and a lot of time involved in this. So to you, Jared, or whoever else put time into that, I think transparency is going to be huge, and I greatly appreciate all of the work, because this isn't just a simple, hey, here's a one-page, here's what we're doing. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. And we will post every slide that's there, every piece of paper that you see will be posted on our website. So how we arrived and what that discussion will be, everything that you have will be provided to the community as well. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
We'll resume at 6:30. We probably have quite a few people here tonight, so feel free to use these offices for seating. I'm assuming we're going to fill this room up.